Hello, friends. Welcome to my Alternative Wisdom Summit. I'm your host, Pamela Davis, and I am an investigative transformationalist. Yes, I know that's not something that you've all heard before, at least not from anybody else. But what this means is that I am always on the lookout for information to change your life, sometimes in radical ways, and always for the better. And today is no exception. I can tell you I was born with a ferocious curiosity, and I've been plagued with that all of my life. And at a very young age, I began pursuing what you might call uncommon interests. I've devoted much of my life to the exploration of great wonders and mysteries, and I've been fortunate to be able to work on amazing projects around the world. Projects like psychic archaeology, consciousness studies, research into life after death, and I have seen the exciting transformation that can follow when doors of understanding open up in our lives. And I have actually experienced this excitement in my own life. And time and again, I've witnessed transformation in the lives of others, which is why I'm here with you today, inviting you to step through one of these doors with me right now. However, before we get started, there are two items of procedure or business that we need to cover. Now, item number one, first, in order for you to get full benefit of this interview, please browse to Edward T. Martin's page. And you do that by typing into your browser address bar www.alternativewisdomsummit.com/Jesus in India, JESUSININDIA, all like one word. And you'll know that you're on the right screen when you see the photo of my guest, Ed Martin. There are multiple things you can do on this page, but right now all I want you to do is to locate the box for audience comments that says say something. So please do. We'd love to hear from you. Type in the geographical location where you're viewing from. Then if you hear some little gem in this upcoming interview and something you really like, and there will be so many of those you won't believe it, and you want to share some of your thoughts about them with others, we would really love to hear from you. Also, if you have questions about Jesus in India, the lost years, or something else in the interview, this is where you can submit questions. Now, item number two, Ed will be giving you a free thank you gift for being on this interview, and he'll tell you more about this in just a moment. But first, I'm going to tell you a little bit about him. Edward T. Martin is an explorer, author, investigator, adventurer, and teacher, hailing from a rural town in central Texas. Raised in a fundamentalist Christian family, he knew even as a young boy that there was something wrong with his Sunday school teacher's answer when he asked why the Bible gives no information about Jesus from the ages of 12 to 30. I wondered about that too. When told that God doesn't want us to know about it, or it would have been in the Bible, Edward decided he would have to find out for himself. Drawn to Alaska at the age of 19 to fight summertime forest fires, he became involved in stuff like parachuting, archery, mountaineering, and that led to a summit climb of Mount McKinley, which you know is the highest mountain on the North American continent. And after graduating from the University of Alaska in speech communications, he volunteered for the Peace Corps, hoping to be sent to India. However, he was sent instead to Afghanistan, but still close enough to India to begin his investigation of the Jesus in India story he first heard about from Edgar Cayce. Many years and thousands of miles later, he has written and published first The King of Travelers, Jesus' Lost Years in India, and then King of Wisdom, featuring background information on the making of his landmark documentary, Jesus in India, produced by acclaimed filmmaker Paul Davids. Edward T. Martin could be called a Renaissance man, being a dedicated student of comparative religion, spirituality, history, world cultures, and modern and martial arts. So, gifted linguist, he speaks 7 languages. Edward, I'm so pleased to welcome you to the Alternative Wisdom Summit.
Thank you, Pamela. It's wonderful to be with you.
Well, Edward, I already mentioned a little bit about your Texas upbringing, and it must have been really daunting. But please tell us more about the events and circumstances in your youth that drew you finally to India.
When I was growing up in a small town in the Texas Hill Country, my parents were very religious. That is, they were both strong fundamentalist Christians, especially my mother, and uh, they also believed in the power and importance of education. They loved books and reading, and they believed in the importance of travel. That every summer we would take a family vacation trip for at least 4 weeks and sometimes even 5 or 6 weeks because my parents owned their own business and it was a dry cleaners and laundry, and they could take time off uh, to have as long a vacation as we wanted. So we loved to travel in the summertime and visit different parts of the United States, especially out here where we are now in California. And so we really loved that. And we'd go to places like the original Disneyland and Knott's Berry Farm and so on. About my Jesus in India research as a youngster, I started on my own to believe in reincarnation. I was reading different books about Hinduism and Buddhism, various different religions and other cultures, books about India and so on. And reincarnation to me explained a lot of things. So I became interested in reincarnation, and ultimately that's what led me into my questions about Jesus in India.
You know, it's interesting that you would say that because I began remembering past lifetimes when I was about 3.5 or 4 years old. And it is amazing how coming to an understanding of reincarnation can open up so much more in your life. I just wish everybody could have that experience and that insight, you know?
That's true. I,
Yeah.
I remember I remember one thing that happened to me was my Spanish teacher in high school used to ask my parents, "Who's Ed's Spanish tutor?" It's not like he's learning Spanish; it's like he's remembering it. And they said he doesn't have a tutor. I was remembering it from my past lifetimes in Spain.
No, that's crazy. That's wonderful. Um, oh, I believe in that completely. I've heard you talk about this, and I also wondered about this passage in the Gospel of Luke that just sort of sweeps under the carpet a huge chunk of the life of Jesus. Tell us about that.
It's the end of the second chapter of Luke. It's the 52nd verse. And Jesus increased in wisdom and in stature and in favor with God and man. And that is the only passage in the New Testament concerning the missing 18 years from when Jesus was 12 years old till when he was 30 years old and beginning his ministry, that is, being baptized by John the Baptist. So there's 18 years that's just covered by that one verse. And
Explains making a whole lot of tables and chairs.
that's right. And I would ask my Sunday school teachers when I was growing up, where was he during that missing 18 years? Was he just making tables and chairs with Joseph? And if that was the case, that's fine. Why don't they tell us about that? And the Bible school teachers would say, well, God does not want us to know about that. And I'd say, why? And
Very, very good question.
they'd say, you ask too many questions. And I'd say, why did God give us inquiring minds if we're not supposed to use our minds and think and question?
Well, I know that you said that you were young, you were a teenager when you became when you heard about Edgar Cayce. So tell us about that and tell us what Edgar Cayce says about Jesus and the lost years.
Well, I was 18 years old, and I was in West Texas. I met a young man from Hopkinsville, Kentucky, which is the area where Edgar Cayce grew up. Cayce was born on a farm near Hopkinsville, Kentucky in 1877. And what I was told about Cayce was that Cayce was a very spiritual, very devout Christian young man, and that Cayce found at an early age that he could go into a trance state, and in this self-trance state, he could diagnose illnesses that seemed to be incurable, and the information that came out in the trance state, it was unorthodox. It prescribed a variety of treatments, chiropractic, surgery, many different things, but the information was accurate again and again, accurate and helpful. And in later lifetime, his later life, Cayce was asked to do past lifetime readings about people, and he would go into the trance state to do that.
Edward, can I ask you, we're getting a little popping on your microphone. Maybe move back just a tiny bit.
Sure.
A little farther back.
Okay.
From the microphone. Okay, that's probably better. Because we want to hear everything that you say clearly. It's way too important to not get it all with perfect clarity.
Thank you.
Now, tell us how you got the title. I love the story of how you got the title of your book, King of Travel.
I was teaching in Pakistan at the time during the Russian war in Afghanistan, and I was working with refugees, Afghan adults who were refugees from the war in Afghanistan. It was a program called IRC, International Rescue Committee. I had one of my evening classes they called the doctor's class, because most of my students there were either medical doctors or PhDs. Wonderful class, and they were very knowledgeable about the Muslim religion and so on. And one of the things they told me was about a great Muslim traveler named Ibn Battuta, who lived in the 1200s. And Ibn Battuta was originally from Morocco, and they told how that Ibn Battuta had traveled from Morocco across North Africa to Arabia, to India, later to China, and eventually he returned to Morocco in his old age. And the story was Ibn Battuta was on his deathbed, and some admirers came and they gathered around him and said, "You are the greatest of all travelers." And the story was that Ibn Battuta sat up and he smiled at them and he shook one finger and he said, "No, if you learn the truth about Hazrat Isa, Prophet Jesus, you will find Jesus is King of Travelers." And that phrase, King of Travelers, stuck in my mind.
Yeah, I love that. I love that story. We still need you to move a little bit farther back, Edward.
Okay.
Yeah, just because it pops.
Okay.
All right, talk about, I don't know what you want to talk about first.
Could I mention about, concerning Edgar Cayce, that I wanted to mention that in the past lifetime readings that Cayce did for so many people, I think more than 4,000 past lifetime readings, and among those readings, there were at least 9 times that Cayce told people that they had a past lifetime in India 2,000 years ago, and during that lifetime, they knew young Jesus in India 2,000 years ago. So that's what really got me interested on the path, because if Edgar Cayce said something in the trance state, then I tend to believe that it's probably true.
I think he was very reliable, and I think his accuracy was amazing, especially when you look at the the amazing medical diagnoses that he made, and the way that people would then follow his instructions and recover in some of the most remarkable stories. So I think that I put a great deal of faith in what Edgar Cayce perceived.
I do too. He was very accurate, and he literally saved hundreds of people's lives, and of course he helped many people with the past lifetime readings, for example, Ernest Hemingway sent his mother to get a past lifetime reading for himself and as I understand for his mother also, but of course those the readings for Hemingway and so on, that was private. And I believe that one of the U.S. presidents even got a past lifetime reading, but of course that was private too.
Of course, I had no idea that Hemingway believed in that. That's very interesting to know.
I'll mention a little tidbit here too, that Hemingway wrote a short story about the crucifixion of Jesus, and I didn't know that until after my first book, King of Travelers, came out. But it was if you want to look it up in some big thick book that's collected writings of Ernest Hemingway, I believe the title is One Friday Evening, and it's about a group of 3 or so of the Roman soldiers who took part in the crucifixion of Jesus, and it's the conversation that evening they had at the tavern about the crucifixion and their comments. It's a fascinating little story by Hemingway.
Oh, that is interesting to know. I'm going to have to look that up. All right, what do you want to talk about? Do you want to talk about that strange bottle of beer? Do you want to go right into talking about Joseph of Arimathea? You pick.
Why don't we start with the opening chapter of my first book, King of Travelers, A Very Strange Bottle of Beer, a connection with Jesus in India.
I just love all your stories, but this is a really fun one. I love this.
Well, as I was in the Peace Corps in Afghanistan, my work was that I was teaching English as a second language at part of the Afghan government. It was the place where the national census is made. In Persian, it's called Esoe Markazi Yake Shobat Sedaratas, the National Census Bureau. And I was teaching English as a second language to the Afghan adults there. And what happened was that we had a rough day at work, and after I left work, I went on my bicycle to ride back home, and I stopped at the American Embassy compound, and there's a building there that we call the American Embassy Annex, and at the Annex building, it's considered part of the United States. It's considered American soil there on the embassy compound. So it was one of the few places you could go as an American to have a drink in Afghanistan. And so I was there after work that day, maybe about 4 in the afternoon, and hardly any other customers there. And I was sitting at the bar and going to order a beer, and the Pakistani Christian bartender who worked there, he was called Mr. Wilson, and I saw a beer behind the bar that said Murray Lager, M-U-R-R-E-E, and so I asked Mr. Wilson, that one, can you show it to me? Is that a Pakistani beer? He said, yes, Sahib, it is a Pakistani beer. And I said, is it named after an Englishman? He said, no, Sahib, it's named after Mary. I said, oh, Mary was an English woman. And he said, no, Sahib, Mary is mother of Jesus. And I said, Pakistan is a Muslim country. Why would they name a beer after the mother of Jesus? And he said, because of her tomb, her grave is there. The tomb of Mary, mother of Jesus, is there in Himalayan foothills, northern Pakistan. And I said, you're saying that Mary, the mother of Jesus, is buried in northern Pakistan? Most assuredly, Sahib, it is correct. Holy place last 2,000 years. And then I said, how could Mother Mary have ended up in what's now northern Pakistan? And he said, well, Sahib, some people believe Jesus did not die on cross, that he was in state of near death. That tomb of Joseph of Arimathea had back entrance, and after stone was rolled in front, the healers from India came through back entrance with medicines and everything, and they helped him and healed him. And after 3 days and nights, they all left through the back way. And so he went on to describe how that Jesus made his appearances, and then later in disguise, he went north up to Damascus, recuperated for a couple of years in a safe house, and later returned to India, and his mother insisted on coming with him. And that she died in what's now northern Pakistan and was buried at that hilltop.
Isn't that's such a wonderful story? I just love
I,
that. I
I
think it too. I know it's true because I see it as clearly as if it were, on a movie screen. I see it.
It wasn't what I wanted to find. I was really upset with that, and I had to have another beer. Yeah.
Ty went on there with that kind of news. Okay, so, uh, tell us about the legend of Prince Ravana.
Well, a wonderful book called The Aquarian Gospel of Jesus the Christ, which it's channeled material, but I believe it's of great value. It's wonderful material, I think. And the Aquarian Gospel of Jesus the Christ, it was written by a chaplain who was in the Union Army in the American Civil War, and his name was Levi Dowling. And Levi Dowling, in the years after the Civil War, would go into a deep trance state, especially late at night, and he would contact the Akashic Records, which is the same place Edgar Cayce contacted in the trance state. And the Akashic Records, to put it briefly, they talk about these records in India. It's a place on another dimension, but it's very close to us. And this Akashic Records, it's a compilation of every thought, word, and deed that has ever taken place on the earth plane.
Right.
Sometimes it's called the Book of God's Remembrances in the Bible. But the information from in the Aquarian Gospel of Jesus the Christ is from the Akashic Records, and it's marvelous material which very closely parallels. It talks about the Jagannath Temple at Puri. And one of the things it tells about in there is a wealthy prince from that area of Jagannath, the state in India called Orissa, and that prince was called Ravana, and Prince Ravana and his entourage, his group, had traveled to Israel, and the story is they were in the temple in Jerusalem at the time of the Passover when Jesus was 12 years old. And the story was, if you'll look back in the New Testament at the second chapter of Luke, the passage in which Jesus was missing he was 12 years old. His parents at the end of Passover were looking for him, and they found him. They went back into Jerusalem, and they found him sitting with the priest and the high priest in the temple, giving wonderful answers to their difficult spiritual questions. Well, Prince Ravana, according to this information, the information in the Aquarian Gospel, Prince Ravana later traveled with his group to Nazareth, and Prince Ravana became the patron of Jesus, and Jesus was very keen on going with Ravana back to India and to study Hinduism at the Jagannath Temple at Puri for 6 years, and that's what the information tells.
My intuitive take on that is that Ravana and Joseph of Arimathea were acquainted, probably through trade connections. The Joseph of Arimathea, most people don't. Well, first of all, the family of Jesus was not poor. These are not poor people.
No.
They were the bloodlines. Jesus was. From the royal house, descended from the royal house of David. These people were very upper class, and Joseph. They say that there's discussion about what the word tekton means, which described Joseph's occupation, but it would probably be rather. He was not a like a mason or something. He would have been probably a master architect or something of that nature. And Joseph of Arimathea was known to be one of the richest men in the Mediterranean world, and was said to have had caravans that traveled along the Silk Road and the Salt Roads all the way across, from the Mediterranean far into Asia, and also ships that plied the ports of the Mediterranean, then out and past the Pillars of Hercules, which is Gibraltar, and then up north, doing trade with the Celtic people, with tin. He was a tin merchant, and tin was a necessary component in the manufacture of bronze and probably other things as well. So there was a lot of wealth there.
That's
And
true.
so this would have been, I mean, if I were sending my son into this world, if I were God, I would have wanted to make sure that I placed him in a family where, knowing that he would be in danger all the time, from people wanting to kill him for the beautiful things he was teaching, I would have wanted to place him with people who could afford him a certain amount of mobility and safety.
That is that is true. I think you're exactly right, Pamela. And it's my understanding that that Joseph, the surrogate father of Jesus, was a master craftsman. Uh, as you could say, he was someone like an architect, a master builder, not just a simple carpenter, but he was a skilled individual. I think quite successful, and then also the great uncle of Jesus, Joseph of Arimathea, that, as you say, Joseph of Arimathea at the time was one of the wealthiest men in the world. And if we think for a moment that if we look at the family situation, that Jesus' mother Mary, her mother was Anna, and it was Anna's brother who was Joseph of Arimathea. In other words, Joseph of Arimathea was the great uncle of Jesus, and Joseph of Arimathea, as I understand, owned tin mines up in England and Wales, and Joseph of Arimathea had other business interests that were in connection with the Silk Road, with the merchants on the Silk Road, and the very lucrative trade in silks between China and the Mediterranean, but just to think about the value of tin in the modern world. That think about how many farmers and ranchers can you think of who have one or more tin buckets around the farm or ranch that are made of tin. And you think in the ancient world, how many of the merchants and shopkeepers and homes would have had one or more buckets or other containers made out of tin. It's just a huge amount of wealth. Joseph of Arimathea used to travel, make regular trips with his friends, the Phoenician navigators. From the coast of Israel, they would travel, as you say, across the Mediterranean and past the Pillars of Hercules out into the great Atlantic Ocean, the vast Atlantic, and go up to England and Wales and oversee the operations, the mining operations of tin.
Well, while we're on that topic, I mean, there's a tremendous tradition among the Celtic people, the Welsh and the Irish, about the time that Jesus spent in the British Isles with his uncle Joseph of Arimathea when he was a boy. And there are stories that later in his life, when he was a grown man, he also returned there. But as a young boy, he went and and was initiated by the high Druids. There's an island in the Bay of Dunvegan, which belongs to Scotland. It's a little tiny island called the Isle of Ise, and Ise is a form of the name Isa, which is the Arabic form of Jesus. Mm-hmm. And so the Isle of Ise was named centuries and centuries ago for Jesus because of the fact that he was recorded to have been there. And it was also the headquarters of the Druid order. So you can just imagine what Jesus was doing there, and also in the area of Glastonbury. Of course, everybody knows, you've seen pictures of the Tor, and the Tor was reputed to have been an entrance into the underworld. Well, with the esoteric teachings and initiations that Jesus was going through, it wouldn't be surprising for him to have gone down into something, some initiatory place, called an entrance into the underworld, to experience the kind of transcendence that he would need later on in his life, given the crucifixion that was going to be ahead of him, and his understanding of how to move through the kingdoms of life and consciousness in different dimensions. So, they say, why isn't any of this in the Bible? I have friends who are staunch Christian believers, you might say. And do you know that, I'm sure you know, Edward, that for the first century or two after the crucifixion of Jesus, there were over 200 Gospels in circulation around that part of the world, and they were revered as holy books. We've ended up with 4 or 5, depending on how you count them: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and then the Acts of the Apostles, so 5 if you wish. And those are undoubtedly the least controversial and have certainly been the most expurgated pieces of writing ever composed. What about the other 195 or so or more that were suppressed? Surely there was a great deal of information in those that gave people a little too much leeway, a little too much information, a little too much freedom and responsibility.
I agree. Incidentally, something just briefly about Joseph of Arimathea. There's a wonderful tradition that I have read about that when Jesus was about 10 years old, that Joseph of Arimathea offered to take young Jesus for about a year or year and a half up to England and Wales, and that his parents agreed, and young Jesus was very keen on making the trip with Joseph of Arimathea, and so they went with the Phoenician mariners and traveled in one of their ships, and as you say, went to places in Glastonbury, and that young Jesus, even though he was 10 years old, 11 years old, around that age, my understanding is that he was very mature and had remarkable wisdom and insights, and that he was at that age, I'm sure he met with Druids and went through ceremonies and initiations, and then he returned that to at about the age of 11 and a half years old, back to Israel. That something that ties in also about Joseph of Arimathea is that he was a very influential individual. That we can talk later about how that at the time of the crucifixion, how that he toward the end of the crucifixion of Jesus, that Joseph of Arimathea went running to talk with Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor, and he was immediately given access to Pontius Pilate. Now, if you or I later today before sunset wanted to talk with the governor of California, with Jerry Brown, do you think we could? I'm sure there's some people who could, but in other words, Joseph of Arimathea was a very powerful and well-connected individual.
He certainly was. There's no question about that. So, all right. So we have Jesus moving around with his uncle, and then in his experiences in the British Isles, which I think were very profound. There's a tremendous amount of legendary information and anecdotes that have been in that area for 2,000 years, and I don't think we can just dismiss them.
No.
So after this, how about what would have been, when would Jesus have gone to India, and what would have been well, you know what? Before we go into this, I need to break away for a second, because we have to talk to our audience. I have to give them important information.
Very good.
Hang with me there for a second, Edward.
Sure.
Now, for those of you who joined in late, I'll repeat what I said earlier. If you aren't already on Edward's audience dashboard page, then you need to go there now. In the address box of your web browser, type in this address: www.alternativewisdomsummit.com. facebook.com/Jesus in India, JesusinIndia. And you'll know you're on the right page when you see the words Audience Dashboard, and you can see the photo of our guest, Edward T. Martin. Now, friends, Ed has a free gift, especially for you, as a thank you for listening to us and watching this interview with us today. Ed, your free thank you gift is called Researching the Jesus in India Evidence. In a sentence or two, could you please describe for our listeners what they're getting today in your Researching the Jesus in India Evidence thank you gift?
This is a slide presentation that I did at the International UFO Congress at Laughlin, Nevada, and it was a presentation in which I basically walk people through the evidence. That is, it's a slideshow, and I show people the chain of evidence, the series of books and individuals and so forth that led me into my research and kept my research going. So it's fascinating. I think it's fascinating. People have told me they really enjoyed the presentation. So it's,
you know what? I watched it last night and I was just spellbound. I'm so glad that this is what you chose for the thank you gift, because people are going to love this. Friends, you are going to just eat this up. And Edward does such a wonderful job and presents such gripping information with wonderful slides and illustrated material. It's just boy, the world will not look the same to you after this. And this is just kind of the tip of the iceberg, you know.
Thank you, Pamela. And what I was doing here, the namaste, that is a gesture, and the meaning in India is I recognize and salute the divinity within you. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I salute the divinity in you too. Now, friends, I will tell you in a few moments how to get your free thank you gift, but while you're on this page, I want you to find the special offer button. It's big and it's orange, so it's easy to find. Click on the special offer button now. You'll know you're on the right page when you see the words special offer, followed by the words Edward T. Martin's Jesus in India package. Now, on this page, you can read all about the exclusive special offer that Edward has put together only for you for viewing this interview today. Edward, your package is called Edward T. Martin's Jesus in India package. So in a few sentences, please tell our listeners a little bit about what's in your special offer package that you and your team have put together for our listeners.
Well, just to explain briefly, we have my first book, King of Travelers, Jesus' Lost Years in India, which I wrote after my first 2 research trips to India. And we'll throw in the DVD, the movie Jesus in India, which is the movie Paul Davids and I and our team made in India.
Let me interrupt you there. That is one of the best documentaries I have ever seen in my entire documentary viewing adult life. It's just marvelous. So please.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, but it's just so good.
Thank you. It's gotten wonderful reviews. Reviews, and also we'll throw in the music soundtrack of the movie, Jesus in India, and it's really wonderful music.
It is. It's beautiful.
And we'll add my my second book, Jesus in India, King of Wisdom, which is the story of the 6 weeks of filming the movie in India. And we have some additional bonus materials we'll also throw in.
Well, I've seen it all, and this is just, I was up until the wee hours. I couldn't go to bed. I couldn't put it down. It was just, it's all just fascinating and very different from anything that is going around now. This is wonderful, wonderful material.
Thank you. Thank you, Pamela.
Thank you so much for putting together such a fabulous special offer. Now, friends, if you'd like to take Edward up on his special offer at this exclusive 50% discount, scroll to the top of the screen and click on the Add to Cart button. The rest is easy. Just fill in the form and click on the Submit Order button. And remember that in a moment I'll be telling you how to claim Edward's free gift just for joining us on this interview. Now, I want to go back to this fabulous discussion, Edward. I would also like to explain to people, because it would be very natural for people who haven't heard this before, and how many people have, to say, well, where are you getting this information? I mean, is this some kind of new age thing that happened since Maharishi? Well, no. And we can talk, Edward can talk more about how well the document and how ancient some of the documentation is. But I also want to say that there is also a large body of channeled information. And if you're careful and and you've checked out the integrity and the background of the particular channeler, I've read about 3 books of channeled information about Jesus and the Lost Years, and it's all of the information that is presented in these books I have found corroborated with some of in this ancient evidence that Edward will be talking about. So why don't you go ahead and talk about the antiquity of the evidence that I think proves that Jesus definitely spent a good long time in India.
Yes, looking at the documents and, for example, stone inscriptions, historical documents, physical evidence, looking at the things other than the channel material, and I have a high regard for the channel material, but looking at, as my lawyer friends like to talk about, hard empirical evidence. For example, one of the important pieces of evidence is a 2,000-year-old document which a number of witnesses have seen going back to 1887. The document is called The Life of Saint Isa, the Best of the Sons of Men. And that document was, in modern times, first seen in 1887 by a Russian researcher named Nicholas Notovich, who was on an expedition in 1887 in northwestern India in the area of Kashmir and Ladakh. And in Ladakh, he was thrown from his horse and his leg was fractured. He was recuperating for a number of weeks at the Himasgompa Monastery, Tibetan Buddhist monastery, at a place called Leh, because there was no hospital in the area. And it was during that time that he was recuperating that he became friends with the Tibetan Buddhist monks who were there at the temple. And after some weeks, they liked him and trusted him, and they said, we have a 2,000-year-old document here in the Pali language, ancient Tibetan script, and this document, Life of Saint Isa, the Best of the Sons of Men, it's about young Jesus in India and his life in India 2,000 years ago. Would you like to read it? And so they translated the document, and Nicholas Notovich later took the translation to Europe and had it published as The Unknown Life of Jesus the Christ. And that was in the early 1900s. I know one of the editions was in 1904. And that document, the translation, specifically tells about details about young Jesus being a student at the Jagannath Temple at Puri in the state of Orissa in eastern India. We mentioned, by the way, some channel material before of the Aquarian Gospel of Jesus the Christ. And that channel material and this actual document, the Life of Saint Isa, 2,000-year-old document, both tell almost exactly the same thing. They talk about the Jagannath Temple at Puri, close to the ocean there in northeastern India, and that young Jesus was a student for 6 years or more at the Jagannath Temple at Puri, and that young Jesus was studying Hinduism. And we interviewed in our movie Jesus in India, we interviewed the Shankaracharya of Puri, who is like the Pope of Hinduism, and he confirmed for us. He said, yes, we have the name of Jesus in the ancient written archives, the list of the students. We know by tradition that he was here. Jesus was a student there. We have other documents. We have the Bhavishya Mahapurana, which is a 2,000-year-old document from northwestern India, the area of Srinagar and Kashmir. That document tells how that in the years after the crucifixion, that Jesus became spiritual advisor to King Shalivahan, who was the king of Kashmir for many years, more than 40 years. Jesus worked as spiritual advisor to King Shalivahan in those years after the crucifixion, after Jesus returned to India. And we have other inscriptions and other documents. We have the tomb of Mother Mary there at in Murree, Pakistan, northern Pakistan, the Himalayan foothills. We also have the tomb of Jesus, the tomb of Yus Asaf meaning the leader of the cleansed lepers. And so the actual tomb of Jesus, according to tradition there in Srinagar in Kashmir, Jesus, when he returned after the crucifixion, after surviving the crucifixion, when he returned to India, that he lived, the king of Kashmir gave him a house to live in and fixed him up with a wonderful lady, a young woman, to be his housekeeper. Her name was Marian. And that later Jesus and Marian fell in love, got married, and had several children, and that Jesus undertook many journeys in his later life, and Jesus lived to the ripe old age of about 110, and is buried there in the old city, the Kanyar district, Rosabal district of Srinagar in Kashmir. But there's a huge amount of physical evidence and so on, which I tell about in detail in my materials.
Well, you know, there's another thing that I just remembered that makes a lot of sense, and also makes a tremendous amount of sense, that Jesus would have ultimately gone to Kashmir as opposed to, you know, other places to live. You know, in the Old Testament we have the story of the incident that happened when after wandering in the wilderness for 40 years, Moses was heading toward the promised land, and Joshua, who was a tremendous warrior, very, very fierce and bloodthirsty warrior.
I've known some lawyers like that too, fierce and bloodthirsty.
Yeah, really Freudian slip there. A warrior who was the commander of all of the forces, and there is a story that Moses was not in favor of the slaughter that was going to happen when they went down into the promised land. And you know, in the Bible it talks about how they brought down Jericho, and the orders from Joshua were to leave not a single living thing alive, not to kill all the men, women, and children, and even the animals when they took Jericho. Heaven only knows why. So Moses apparently did not go along with this. And we have the story that, oh, well, God just didn't let him go. You know, God said, no, Moses, you're going to stay and you're going to die here on this mountain. Well, there's another story that Moses, with a smaller group of people who were loyal to him, just took a massive detour and ended up in Kashmir, where they were welcomed by the people and were peacefully integrated into that society. And when you arrive, I have not been there yet myself, but I have friends who traveled there who say that when you get there, the tour guides will ask you if you wish to see the tomb of Moses. They talk about the traditions of Moses having been there. There are villages and family names that have Hebrew origins in that whole area, place names and so forth. And so if Jesus, whose background, of course, was Jewish, wanted to end up in a community where he had, you know, genetic and cultural ties, it makes absolute sense that Kashmir would have been his choice. And then, of course, there are all the legends currently in circulation among the people there of Jesus indeed having been there.
That's right. There's a strong tradition that there was at least one lost tribe of Israel, and perhaps two lost tribes of Israel, and that they, as you say, that they traveled to Kashmir. There is a strong tradition, a great amount of evidence that the current people living in that area of Kashmir and Ladakh in northwestern India, there's a great amount of evidence that those people are actually of Jewish descent. And by the way, that Holger Kersten, who I tell about him in my books and my materials, if the listeners would like to find out more, Holger Kersten, who was originally from Freiberg in Germany, and Holger Kersten is now a Christian monk in Switzerland. He's a renunciate now. But Holger wrote a marvelous book called Jesus Lived in India. I tell about that in my books. But the material by Holger Kersten, he presents a huge amount of the evidence that the modern-day Kashmiri people of India are of Jewish descent. There are strong linguistic indications, cultural indications, the blood types, physical similarities, facial features, the nose, and so on. Even a lot of small things like the shape of the oars used by the people paddling boats on Dal Lake or the Jhelum River. It's heart-shaped at the end of the oar, the same as it is in Israel. And but the linguistic clues, the cultural clues, the ceremonies, it's just an overwhelming amount of evidence about that Jewish connection. And incidentally, the Talmud of Emanuel document that we may have talked about a bit before, which some researchers, including myself, believe the Talmud of Emanuel document is the original book of Matthew, the original Gospel of Matthew. And of course, the Gospel of Matthew that we have in the current New Testament, Gospel of Matthew, has been censored and altered and redacted in more than 200 places. And there's a marvelous book that my mentor, Dr. Jim Deerdorf, wrote called Celestial Teachings. And Celestial Teachings by Jim Deerdorf has a verse-by-verse comparison between the Talmud of Emanuel and the corresponding verse in traditional Matthew. And Matthew, in other words, to briefly explain, in the early Christian church around 100 A.D., there was Bishop Papias, and Bishop Papias, one of his scribes was named Burrhus. And Burrhus and many of the other Christian leaders around 100 A.D. had been raised as Jewish Pharisees. They believed in resurrection of dead bodies. They believed in the low status, inferior status of women. They believed in original sin, and a lot of these other things that I think that Jesus himself did not really believe in. But what happened was that Bishop Papias, as I understand, had the original Logia document, which was to become Matthew, and Bishop Papias said to Burrhus the scribe, "This is full of heresies. I want you to fix it and cut out what you need to cut out and put in what is going to be kosher, and make it so it's going to be like we want." And so the passages about Jesus studying in India as a youth, the passages about extraterrestrial human visitors in their singing metal ships from the far distances of space, the passages about the importance and equality of women and the rights of women, and the teachings of Jesus about reincarnation and karma, and on and on. All those things were cut out, and the Pharisee spin, the Pharisee teachings were put in, sadly.
Also, I would like to, that's just so, well, you know, I've studied this a long time myself, so this is very much in alignment with what I have learned myself and what I believe. And I would like to explain the huge deal it is about the elimination, the expunging of the notion of karma and reincarnation from the Bible. You have to remember that the Emperor Constantine made Christianity the official religion of the empire, which then became the Holy Roman Empire in, what was it, Edward, 325, I believe 323 or 325 AD. And and the reason that this was chosen is because Christianity was spreading like crazy, and his advisors said, well, you got to get a leash on this. You got to get this under control. And so they saw it as a tremendous power play to be able to control the Christians. Well, there were a few ways that they did this. The Christian bishops, up until that time, were chosen by their local communities according to the good lives that they lead. These were the natural leaders of the community who were virtuous and known for their justice and their all the good things that people admired. They were good Christians, and they were therefore chosen by the people to be their bishops. Well, in one coup, Constantine took the privilege upon himself of naming the bishops, appointing the bishops. So took that right out of the hands of the people. And then, what do you do to get people really dependent on you? Well, you get rid of the concept of karma and reincarnation. Because with reincarnation, of course, you make the world that you live, the life that you're living, is the result of your actions and your beliefs and your choices. You make the life that you live, and you deal with the consequences. And if your choices are poor, you're going to have uncomfortable circumstances to deal with eventually, either in this life or in another one. And there is nobody that can take that away from you. There is no absolution. There is no confession that can tell you, oh, well, it's all okay now, don't worry about it, just go home and say this thing, whatever, this prayer a few times and you're fine. No, none of that. Karma and reincarnation that don't allow for that. Also, therefore, it means that you are in direct communication with spirit, with God. There is no need then, if you are the architect of your own life and your own destiny, then why do you need a church, and why do you need priests, and why do you need a whole structure that became the Catholic Church? So they had to take away the individual's power and authority and give that power, invest that power into the hands of the church and the priests and the whole hierarchy. So this was one of this was the reason why all mention, well, not all, they actually missed a few, but almost all references to rebirth and karma are removed from the Christian Gospels or writings as we know them.
That's true. And Pamela, if I could briefly mention something that I would ask the listeners, if you will, just to kind of stretch a little bit for the next few moments, that a passage, there's something I'd just briefly like to tell about, which is concerning a case, a UFO contactee case from Switzerland called the Billy Meier case, which personally I believe is a true case. I believe it's a genuine, ongoing contact case. Billy Edward Meier of Hinterschmidt-Ruti in Germany. I am friends with one of his sons, Methuselah. I've been over there. I have done a lot of research on this case through the years. And just to briefly mention, if you'll stretch your minds a bit, imagine doing time travel. And this is something that comes up in a lot of UFO cases about time travel and that technology. And what happened with Billy Meier in the year 1957, he was his teacher at the time, Ascot, who was a colleague of the human extraterrestrials from the Pleiades. Ascot took him back in time. They went from 1957 AD back to 32 AD, They went to the Garden of Gethsemane there in Israel, and Billy was able to talk for about 2 hours with Jesus. That is Emmanuel. That is, according to this information, in his lifetime, he was actually, or mostly known by the name Emmanuel, meaning the one with godly wisdom. But this conversation with Jesus, that the reason I mention this is that they had a lengthy discussion that went on. I've read again and again, read the written transcript of that discussion, and part of the passages in there, one of the passages is that I'm quoting Jesus, quoting Emmanuel. He's talking about the future, 2,000 years in the future, and just to paraphrase, he said, "Many lies shall get put into my mouth. Many lies shall get put into my mouth." And he was saying that they will turn his teachings about reincarnation and karma, they will turn that into a cult, a worldwide cult. And he said, and many of those who will be the priests and ministers and practitioners of that cult, many of them, their hearts will be far from him, far from Jesus and his true teachings. And they shall only be interested in getting the goods and chattels of the people, getting their money and controlling them. And another aspect of that is that Jesus was, in my understanding, from those comments in that conversation between Jesus and Billy Meyer, that Jesus was saying that he wanted to be an example and he wanted to empower people. He wanted people to grow spiritually, and he wanted to empower people, and he wanted to, in other words, the thing he did not want was a cult religion to be formed based on the idea of salvation from hellfire by going to church at least once a year at Easter, put $5 in the connection basket, call on the holy name of Jesus as your Savior, and then go live like a skunk the rest of the year. That's not what Jesus was teaching. He was trying to empower people, and over the course of many, many lifetimes on this upward spiral, lifetime after lifetime, to gain wisdom and knowledge, and to, through meditation and prayer, get in touch with your eternal human spirit, which is part of omnipotence, and to grow spiritually. So that's a very interesting passage, and I can help people to get in touch with, if you like to, in the Meyer material, if you'd like to find a transcript of that conversation between Billy Meyer and Jesus. It's a fascinating conversation, but that Jesus was very saddened by the way that his teachings would be perverted, and he knew it would happen.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And even, you don't even have to resort to this kind of conversation, although I would. I mean, I think it's fascinating, and I can't wait to get into this material myself. But as Edward was just now speaking, I remembered that there are a number of passages, but there is the one place in the Bible where Jesus is said to have gone up onto a mountain or the hill with John and, was it Peter? I mean, 2 or 3 of his followers, and he asks them, "Who do men say that I am?"
Mm-hmm.
Or that I was, right? So, "Who do men say that I am?" And then his followers say, "Well, some say that you are the prophet Elijah."
Mm-hmm.
So why would they say, "Some say that you are the prophet Elijah," if it were not accepted that Jesus could be the reincarnation of a previous prophet?
Exactly.
I mean, you wouldn't just say that if that were not part of the prevailing belief system at the time.
Exactly. If you look back at through the 3 synoptic gospels, that is Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and John has a different structure, but if you look through those 3 synoptic gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and you look at that passage that you're talking about, which is so important, that who do men say that I am? In at least one of the accounts, you'll find the statement, the apostles were saying, "But was it not prophesied that Elias would return first?" And then it was said in the very next verse, and Jesus spake unto them, Verily I say unto you, Elias has returned, and men have done unto him what they would. And then in the very next verse, it's just black and white. There it says, and then the disciples understood that he spake to them of John the Baptist. In other words, John the Baptist, the way it looked to me, John the Baptist, Jesus was saying John the Baptist was a reincarnation of an earlier prophet, Elias. And then I would say to the Bible teachers, well, this looks like reincarnation. Well, it's not what it looks like. Well, what does it? What is it? It's like, well, it's not what it seems to be. Well, what is it? And they say, well, listen, we're running out of time now. We have to. You see what I'm saying?
Oh yes, it's just sad, really. They
Yeah.
also say that when the Bible was reissued, probably under the orders of King James, and Francis Bacon was head of that committee that rewrote the Bible. We have the King James version,
Mm-hmm.
that I have heard. I guess there'd be a way to check this out, but I've been told that the words of the 23rd Psalm were different until they changed them. The final phrase of the 23rd Psalm was, "And goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my lives,
Of my lives, multiple
and I shall
lifetimes.
dwell, and
Yeah.
I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever."
Right.
Lives, plural, of all the days of my lives, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever.
Mhm. That
So that was again, redacted, and can't have that. How did that get in there?
can have that, and I've also Aramaic scholars have told me that looking at there's some little things like indefinite articles like a, an, and the in English, and I've been told by Aramaic scholars that, for example, there's a passage in which in our current translation we have Jesus was like kind of pounding people over the head and saying, I am the way, the truth, and the light. No man cometh unto the Father but by me. In other words, I'm the only correct religion. I'm the only way, the only path, and if you don't believe and accept me as your Savior, you're going to burn in hell for eternity.
Yeah,
And Aramaic scholars have told me, they said that what he was actually saying in Aramaic is, I am a way, a truth, and a light. No man cometh unto the Father but by one like me, but by my likeness. In other words, you see the difference?
absolutely. And of course, in the Bhagavad Gita too, Krishna, who was another avatar, another Christ-like figure, told his disciple Arjuna, whenever the balance of good and evil is threatened to be overturned, I return, I come, Arjuna.
Mm-hmm.
So here is the promise that God sends his son, he sends his representative, his embodiment, when we most need him. I suppose one day it'll be a woman, but I don't think we're ready for that yet. But, whenever we need that, this is the promise that is made, and the promise that is kept by the arrival of these avatars, like Jesus, like Krishna, like Buddha, and others. Down
That's
through.
right. Yes, that's right. And I would say, incidentally, you know about Kuan Yin and
Yeah.
the Chinese divine being, female divine being, and
Yes,
of course
yes.
Hinduism has many
Goddesses.
wonderful, yeah, wonderful female divine beings, and if you look in I think the proper way, the right way at Christianity and at Islam, you'll see the many holy women in the Bible, and they're great examples. And for example, I think Mary Magdalene has gotten a bad rap. I think Mary Magdalene was an outstanding individual and a
Well,
very
I know, but she was never a prostitute.
right.
Mary Magdalene was a priestess of Isis
Hmm.
and had been trained in the mysteries, and this is the reason why she, of all of the disciples, could understand Jesus' most inner secret teachings, because she had been raised from the time she was a little girl in the mystery schools.
Mm-hmm.
And when
Yes.
he spoke and discussed the mysteries, Mary Magdalene had the background to understand what he was talking about, whereas the
Mm-hmm.
disciples, as it says in the Bible, they were fishermen, a tax collector, and other things, but they had not had that deep training in the mysteries as Mary Magdalene did have.
And incidentally, that you may know the rest of the story about Mary Magdalene, that there is a strong tradition that at the time of the crucifixion of Jesus, that Mary Magdalene was in the early part of pregnancy,
Oh,
that
yeah.
about a year earlier that she and Jesus had secretly been married, and that Mary Magdalene, a short time after the crucifixion, that Mary Magdalene and some other women went aboard a ship, probably in disguise, and they went to the south of France, where that Mary Magdalene gave birth later to a daughter, Sarah, a
Sarah.
beautiful red-haired child, and that Sarah grew up to become the cornerstone of the Merovingian royalty of France.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, someone in our Jesus in India movie, a lady who's in our Jesus in India movie, is her family in the 1700s in France. Her family, the Demarest family, came to from France to North America, and the Demarest family has a modern-day branch in the state of Florida, and that lady, I think it's okay if I mention her name, Suzanne Olsen, is part of that lineage of the Demarest family. So in other words, that Suzanne Olsen has strong reasons to believe that she is a biological descendant of Mary Magdalene and Jesus. And I might mention just briefly, these are hot potatoes. I'll throw another hot potato in just briefly. Aziz Kashmiri, the retired newspaper editor in northwestern India at Srinagar, Kashmir, and he appears in our movie. And I interviewed him on my first trip to India in 1974. But Aziz Kashmiri he doesn't tell you this right away, but he is a biological descendant of when Jesus, after the crucifixion, had returned to Kashmir, and Jesus was advisor to King Shalivahan for many years. Well, Jesus had chosen a housekeeping lady from about 50 ladies that King Shalivahan had brought. He chose a lady named Marianne and to be his housekeeping lady. And Jesus and Marianne later fell in love and got married and had several children. And that's, by the way, how the Talmud of Emanuel document got into modern hands, is that the Talmud, Jesus, in the years after the crucifixion there in Srinagar, Kashmir, Jesus and his next door neighbor, here's a hot potato, next door neighbor, Judas Iscariot, who was not the
All right. Just wait. No, okay.
Okay.
All right. We're just hold that thought. Okay.
Okay.
The next door neighbor, Judas Iscariot. This is just all right. Hang on,
Okay.
because I have to take a moment to remind you audience members that by now you should have been to the special offer page. And if you haven't, here's the link to Edward's webpage for this interview. www.alternativewisdomsummit.com/Jesus in India. Now on this page, look for the special offer button, then click on that special offer button now. And on this special offer page, you can read all about the exclusive special offer that Edward has generously put together with so many wonderful items. For example, take a look at the Jesus in India DVD. Easily one of the best, as I said a while ago, one of the very best, probably the best documentary I have ever seen. And the music is divine. It's beautiful. Remember when Edward spoke about the years Jesus spent in India? Well, this is where you get everything that Edward has to say about the thousands of miles Jesus traveled and the fascinating documentation of his presence in several amazing places where he stopped to study and to teach. So go ahead, take a look, and take advantage of Edward's special offer at this exclusive 50% discount. Then click on the Add to Cart button now. The rest is easy. Just fill in the form and click on the Submit Order button. All right, Edward. Judas Iscariot, the name from Jesus. Let's go on with that.
Well, to tell you just briefly, The Talmud of Emanuel document, which I mentioned about before, which Dr. Jim Durdorf and quite a few other researchers and New Testament scholars believe is maybe the original book of Matthew, or the missing book called Proto-Matthew, in the early Christian church referred to as the Logia, the Word. But what happened? The Talmud of Emanuel explains that Judas Iscariot, the scribe and treasurer, one of Jesus' chosen 12, Judas Iscariot was not the betrayer. Instead, a man with a similar name, Judah Iscariot, who is the son of a rich and powerful Pharisee, Simeon Iscariot, was the real betrayer, and that Judah Iscariot, the son of Simeon, was a kind of a ne'er-do-well and kind of a rich, spoiled kid. I won't name any modern-day politicians I could think of, but anyway, some
Many of them.
rich, spoiled kid. Anyway, and what happened was that Judah Iscariot, he was paid for doing two crimes. The first crime was that he would hang around Jesus and the 12 and would keep an eye on things, and that he stole the original Talmud of Emanuel writings from the bag of Judas Iscariot, the scribe and treasurer of the group. And he took the Talmud of Emanuel scrolls, and turned them over to the priest and the high priest, and was paid 70 pieces of silver for that crime. Then the second crime that Judah Iscariot, son of Simeon, did was that the night of the betrayal in Gethsemane, that Judah Iscariot walked up there and he kissed on the cheeks Jesus, and he said, I have turned from my old ways, and I turn now to become your follower. And that was the kiss of betrayal to identify him, and he was later paid 30 pieces of silver for that. But then, according to the Talmud of Emanuel document, that Judah Iscariot, the real betrayer, he felt great remorse, and the next morning, when Jesus was being beaten up by the Romans, they had Jesus sitting on a wooden bench with a crown of thorns on his head, and the Roman soldiers were hitting the crown of thorns with reeds, and the blood was flowing down his face, and so on. That at one point, the people outside were looking through the open door and the open windows, and Judah Iscariot, the real betrayer, peeked in, and their eyes met, and that blood was running down Jesus' face, and their eyes met, and that the look that Jesus had was not, I know who you are and I hate you. Instead, it was like, I know who you are and I forgive you. And that the story is that Judah Iscariot snapped. He went running to the priest and the high priest in the temple, and he threw the 30 pieces of silver on the floor and said, I've done a horrible thing. I have betrayed an innocent man, a wise and good man. I have done an evil thing. And the story was that in the Talmud of Emanuel, the priests say, well, we don't care how you feel. You did what we asked, and we paid you, and that's the end of it for us. If you're feeling bad about something you did, that's your problem. And the story was that Judah Iscariot turned, wept bitterly, and fled. And standing in the group right there was his father, Simeon Iscariot. And Simeon sent one of his servants, perhaps kind of a heavy-set gentleman, and sent him to follow him. And the servant came back later and said something to the effect, Judah Iscariot went to a tavern, had some stiff drinks, and then he went out to the edge of the city, to the area that is the potter's field, climbed up in one of the higher trees, like one of the old olive trees, and took his belt off, tied it to his neck, tied the other end to a strong branch, and jumped. And that broke his neck and hanged himself, and he died, committed suicide. Mm-hmm. And then, so when the news was brought back, Then the father and the others decided this is going to look terrible, going to sound terrible. And then someone said, "What the names? Wait, the treasurer, Judas Iscariot. The names are almost identical. Let's pay some people off, have them go out and spread the word that it was one of his own chosen 12 who betrayed him." So then, we'll have these people say he could have picked any 12 people he wanted, but he picked a rotten apple who betrayed him. So how can his teachings be any good? How can his teachings be any good? And then so that's what they did, and the people believed it, and the 12 apostles were in fear for their lives, and no one could refute it. And so for this last 2,000 years, that Judas Iscariot, who was innocent of any wrongdoing, that has been blamed unfairly. But Judas Iscariot joined Jesus, according to the Talmud of Emanuel material, up in Damascus, along with Mother Mary, and the group went back to from Israel to India, and that after Mother Mary died and was buried in what's now northern Pakistan, that Judas Iscariot continued on with Jesus and became his lifelong neighbor there in Srinagar, and in the evenings together, they, at their leisure, the two of them could sit together and exactly write down his teachings, like the Sermon on the Mount, walking on the water, and these other teachings in the Aramaic. They could correctly together write the Aramaic writings. And then at the end of his life, toward the end of his life, that Jesus asked his oldest son, Joseph, who was named after the surrogate father, take these scrolls, the Talmud of Emanuel, this document in preservative resin, take it and go on the Silk Road with the caravan, travel 4,000 miles, take it back to Israel, find the Hinnom Valley and the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea in the old wall, just south of the old walled city of Jerusalem. Inside the tomb, it's about the size of 2 Volkswagen minibuses parked side by side, and there are flat black stones. Underneath one of the stones, you'll find a cavity. Put these scrolls in a stone box with a stone lid, and the preservative resin is in there, and bury that under one of the black stones in the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea. And it was in 1963 that Billy Meyer and Issa Rashid were directed to go there by his teacher Ascot, and they went to the back tunnel entrance, got in there, and they found the scrolls. They later were translated by Issa Rashid from Aramaic to German, and then German to English. So that's how we have the Talmud of Emanuel document today.
Well, it's such a fascinating story, and it's plausible. I mean, it certainly is. It's certainly different from what we've ever heard, but I'm sure there's good reason for that. But you have to say that yes, this really could have happened.
If I could mention something just briefly, I've had a number of different, I could say I've had a lot of Christian ministers tell me privately, they've said that they never believed that Judas Iscariot was the betrayer. It was just too fishy. It just didn't. For example, they're eating the Last Supper, and when in the traditional passage that Judas Iscariot says, "Is it I, Master?" and so on like that. Well, these other guys would have jumped on him like a duck on a June bug. You know what? You're not going to betray him. We're not going to let you betray him. There's a whole bunch of things in there that. Or why would he pick a rotten apple? He could pick any 12 people he wanted to. You see what I'm getting at?
Of course, of course. Then, of course, there's the other theory that in the Gospel of Judas that was discovered very recently, that Judas Iscariot has a different role. And again, this also makes sense that Jesus knew what he had to go through, and it had to happen. It's not like this was an accident that he got captured and crucified. It had been in the cards all along, and so he needed someone to precipitate the incident. And knowing that it had to happen, it seems to me natural that he would have chosen someone of utmost trust, someone that he could completely rely on to do what had to be done, no matter how hard it was. And that this was possibly the role that Judas Iscariot played as well. It's a different theory, but again, one thing I don't feel is true in my heart is that Judas Iscariot was the bad guy. You
I
know?
don't feel he was the bad guy either. And one incidental thing, the Talmud of Emanuel also has some passages which explain how that Saul of Tarsus, of course, who later became Paul, the Apostle Paul, that Saul of Tarsus actually had a number of face-to-face meetings with Jesus, and that they even had some heated arguments. And there was one of those arguments that the Talmud of Emanuel tells about, in which Saul of Tarsus came up at night up to a campfire, and I think it was in Gethsemane, some weeks or months before the crucifixion, and Saul of Tarsus chewed Jesus out and said, I think your teachings are stupid and your ideas are foolish, and the Talmud of Emanuel tells how that Jesus got mad at him and said, "You're the one who's stupid. You're the one who's foolish. And you're going to pervert my teachings." And that Jesus picked up a stick, a branch, and chased him into the darkness, trying to thrash him.
Oh, good. I'm glad that somebody gave Paul a
I'm
bit
glad.
of
Yeah, that makes sense. It makes a lot of sense to me.
really. Well, let's go back because we are running out of time, but I wanted to quickly get you to mention a couple of the other sources who confirmed that Jesus and who taught that Jesus was in India. What about Sai Baba, Yogananda, and Nicholas Roerich?
Wonderful sources. I consider myself a Christian. I'm what you could call a new thought, a new age kind of a Christian, and I'm active with a church group called Unity, which about half or more of the people in Unity believe in reincarnation and karma. And so I consider myself a Christian. I believe that Jesus was teaching reincarnation. But about Yogananda, and I also consider myself a Yogananda devotee. I love Yogananda's teachings, Paramhansa Yogananda. But Yogananda confirmed by spiritual means that Jesus did live in India, and also Satya Sai Baba. I'm not a devotee of the late Sai Baba, but Sai Baba, I only heard wonderful things about him, like I heard wonderful things about Yogananda. And Sai Baba also confirmed by spiritual means that Jesus lived in India, and also that Nicholas Roerich, a wonderful Russian painter and fantastic painter. You can read about him and so on in my books, and find out about the Nicholas Roerich Museum in New York City, and so on. That Roerich was another one of the researchers who was a witness in the 1920s to the Life of St. Isa document, the 2,000-year-old document in Ladakh at the Himas Monastery in Ladakh, northwestern India. So there are many witnesses and researchers about physical documents, physical evidence, the Bhavishya Mahapurana document, and many other documents and so on. It's an amazing amount of material. It's not just folklore and legends. There's a lot of physical evidence.
Well, I think it should be clear to our viewers that this is a huge topic, and it really, there are so many ramifications, and with my interest in Ed's, I know that we could literally go on all day, and we cannot because we are really out of time. So, Ed, I can't believe it, but we gotta stop, and I still have so many things I'd like to ask you, but I have to give some important information for our audience. All right, this is how you get your free thank you gift from Ed. You need to be on the audience dashboard webpage, and in case you haven't seen this page yet, it's located at www.alternativewisdomsummit.com/Jesus in India. To get the thank you gift, click on the special offer button to get to the special offer page, and then scroll down and look for the box with the red dotted lines that has the heading Edward T. Martin's Thank You Gift. Fill in your name, email address, and click the send button, and within moments we'll automatically send you your link to Edward's thank you gift, which you are going to love. So for you that joined this interview late and missed some of what we talked about, don't worry. We'll be posting the replay in a few minutes, and we'll leave it up for 48 hours. If you want to share this free 48-hour replay with a friend, please send them to www.alternativewisdomsummit.com. Also, if you haven't already done so, now is the time to take advantage of Edward's special offer, because as a truth seeker, you really do need this powerful, groundbreaking information. So take advantage of this exclusive 50% discount. Click on the Add to Cart button now. The rest is easy. Just fill in the form and click on the Submit Order button. Friends, thank you for joining me and Edward. And Edward, thank you for participating in this incredible interview. And thank you for sharing your amazing discoveries, insights, and adventures with us today.
Pamela, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And thank you to everybody for listening. I hope you enjoyed this, and you can find a lot more information in my materials.
All right, friends, that's all for now. This is the Alternative Wisdom Summit, and I'm Pamela Davis, sending you blessings and best wishes. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.